Hi there, Karen Flaherty from Living by Human Design. Hope you're doing well today. Today's Human Design weather is all about the gate 13, which is called the listener. Okay, so this week we got the sun in gate 13, which comes right off the top of the G center. And I want to just mention that I had it wrong last week. Somebody pointed out to me that I said the gate 19 was coming off the left side of the root, and it's actually coming off the right side. It was up here, the top line coming off the root on the right side. So my apologies. So we started the gate 13 yesterday, February 2nd. It goes until the 7th of February. We've got the Earth in gate 7, which is right over here. So they're both coming off the G center this week. The 13 is over here off the G, and the 7 is over here. And the 7 is called the gate of leadership, or the army. Got a few different names, but it's all about leadership. Democratic, small d, democratic leadership in terms of being invited into being in a leadership position. So this week, we've only got the gate 6124 defined. And so they, again, have the head and ajna defined in the human design chart and for everybody. So again, everybody is going to have this because it was occurring last week as well. We've got this 6124 that's still in Mercury, 61 still in Mercury. And so it moves, it basically defines our head and ajna and makes everyone think that they know what they're talking about. So, and just FYI, usually half the world has this defined, or at least the ajna defined. And so for the entirety of the world to have this defined is quite different. Those people who you usually think are open-minded or can really think outside the box, or are willing to look at all sides of an argument, they're not going to be so much of that mind this week and last week. And you could see that at the UN, for example, at the United Nations. You could see that in politics. You could see that in economics. You could see that in showing up in a lot of different places where people just weren't willing to have the discussion or have much of a discussion. So things like that will happen. So watch out for that in your world as well. Venus is direct now. Mercury goes direct on February 4th. And that will be a good thing for most of us. I usually don't have any issues at all during Mercury retrograde. And this one has been a real doozy. So I hope that you're muddling through as I am. Cars breaking down, telephones not working the way I thought they were, the computer kind of blitzing every once in a while. So hope things are okay in your world, and everything should be pretty much back to normal on Friday the 4th. And we also had a new moon on the 1st of February, and that was a good time to reflect on what you might want coming up in the next few weeks. So the sun is in gate 13, and that's the gate called the gate of the listener. It's also called the fellowship of man, which is kind of a high aspect of this gate. These are universal ideas and values in an ordered framework, which inspires humanistic cooperation. So the idea here is that the listening will bring about unity and unity consciousness, perhaps, and then have cooperation amongst people. There's a good reason it comes off the G center. It's all about love and direction, and helping people to get to the love and direction in their own lives, especially if they have an open G, for example. In IHDS, the incarnation crosses this week are the crosses of the Sphinx, listening, and masks. And then in gate 7, we've got leadership, which is, as I said, also called the army, or the role of self and interaction in the original I Ching. So this is the point of convergence. By design, it's the need for leadership to guide and order society. So as I said, it's usually somebody who's invited into this position because they have these leadership capabilities, because people trust them, basically, because they can get something done, and because they're willing to get something done. So they wouldn't have necessarily raised their hand to do it, but when asked, they're willing to do it because innately they realize that they are a leader by design. In the Gene Keys, division is the shadow. You can imagine if someone doesn't want to be the leader, or they want to be a divisive leader, they can be that also. Guidance is the gift, and virtue is the CD. So here we have the gene key 13, and Richard Rudd has the shadow as discord. The gift is discernment, and the CD is empathy. And so how do we go from the listener and what we were just talking about to these three different aspects of the gate or the gene key? Basically, the gate 13 or the gene key 13 is all about listening. It's about listening and taking the lessons of the past into the future. And so if one is a good listener, it's usually because you've learned from your own past and you've been able to reconcile what's gone on in the past, make sense of it, and then help other people by listening to their concerns or woes or challenges, right? The people with this gate are usually very good listeners, and in professions like therapists and psychiatrists, counselors of any kind, lawyers, accountants. I've actually met some accountants with the gate 13. It can be any type of profession where listening is a big, consultants, of course, where listening is a big aspect of that role, right? Where you listen to everything, make sense of it from your own past, from other things you know of and other experiences, and then make sense of it for them going forward. They're not necessarily asking for advice. Literally, the gate 13 are people who get stopped in the supermarket and people say to them, "Oh, you look like somebody I could talk to," right? They have this trust about them, this kind of trusting nature, that people can trust them with their secrets and not tell, basically. So here the shadow is discord, where the people who have this gate or gene key are people who have not made peace with the past. They just haven't. They still are upset about their past. They might be angry about their past. They might be still trying to figure it out, basically. And so that's where the discord comes from, where they're not really such eager listeners, right? Because they haven't made peace with the past. The gift of discernment comes when those people have made peace with the past and then are able to discern what would help others going forward, right? So they take the lessons from the past and they bring them forward. The empathy comes from really being able to put yourself in somebody else's emotions, in their place, in their shoes, right? So it's not sympathy. Sympathy is having, a concern or somewhat understanding of another's predicament. The empathy is really putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. It literally means to be within another. And people with, for example, the open solar plexus on the right side of the chart here, they are the ones who can be empathetic. They are the empaths in the world, and they are able to really be in somebody else's energy because they take it in so profoundly. They take it in and they actually amplify it. And so they're able to take on that role, to be that, to have that empathy. That doesn't mean that they're the only ones, but they certainly are the most, there's half the population, and they have that ability to be in somebody else's feelings and emotions, and sometimes even sickness. They can even feel sicknesses at times. So here in this graphic, Richard says, discernment emerges as your emotional nature comes more and more into awareness, right? So your own emotional nature you become aware of your own emotional nature, of the lessons from the past, and then discernment emerges. And he also says, when we listen from our heart, our soul, then we begin to see hope in everything around us. Because the idea with empathy is that we can really get to a place of optimism. You can imagine if you're not learning from the lessons of the past, if you're in the discord, in the shadow, you're not able to see the lessons from the past, and you're actually not able to be very optimistic. You're quite pessimistic, a feeling that really doesn't go away. And in fact, that pessimism can be, you can feel it in the culture at times, that nothing will ever change, because we don't give up what we really desire. It's not very hopeful. And so that's where the pessimism lies. We basically feel like nothing will change. and that can be very pessimistic. It's a very sour feeling, right? A lot of people have this feeling, unfortunately, about climate change. We know, we have the awareness that things need to change, that the path that we're on is not good for any of us. And I've heard, stories lately that millennials and Gen Zs just don't even feel like we'll ever get it changed, and they say, what's the use? But held up because of the desire that people have for basically the status quo, that they don't want to change. They don't want to have to recycle or use less plastic or, plant more trees or, stop harvesting the trees in the Amazon and things like that. No, people don't change that, and therefore things aren't going to change. And so the climate change and the unfortunate disasters as a result of climate change stay with us. And so if we have the awareness and can change or tweak or give up on the desires that we also have, the behaviors that we desire to have that have created this problem, then maybe there's a chance that we can get to optimism. But without the change in the behavior, there's no optimism. So sorry, that sounds so dire, but there's a lot of things that are needing to change. So he says, we hear only discord in the world because we are unable to listen to the overall dilemma. In other words, if we're listening for the collective dilemma, then and have that awareness and are willing to change the behavior, then we might be able to get to the optimism. So I'll just leave with this quote from another quote from Richard, where he which is a little more hopeful. He says that those with discernment know in their bellies that this phase of our history must and will lead to a transcendent leap in consciousness, regardless of the subjective interpretations of our fear-based culture in which we live. So we all know that there are people who are quite fearful because of the disease, because of climate change, because of a lot of other reasons. And so if we can, in other words, what he's saying is it doesn't really matter. We're going to have this leap in evolution, this leap in consciousness, whether everybody wants it or not. And we're in the midst of that. Things are changing, things are evolving. And so we get to be in that, and just know if you can keep that fire in your belly, that things are going to change and there will be a leap in consciousness, despite all the fears, that's a good thing. So I hope that resolves some questions you might have. And if not, don't hesitate to shoot me a comment or a question in an email. I'm happy to field those. So we've got personalities born in the Sun Gate 13. And again, I had a mistake there last week too, so apologize for that. We've got the right angle cross of the Sphinx, listening, and masks. And so people like Amal Clooney, and by the way, she and George Clooney both have the same, they're both cross of Sphinx, and they're different times of the year, I think 6 months apart or something like that, but both across of the Sphinx. So that's where their values are in terms of listening to people. I believe she's a human rights lawyer, and very much into social justice, and she's listening and trying to change and using what she knows of the past to make changes going forward. Gertrude Stein, who was, if you don't know who she was the person, an American in Paris who, I'm sure there are a bunch of movies about her, but an American in Paris who helped Picasso and I believe it was Degas and a number of other painters get their wares to the public. And so she could spot the talent. She also worked with Hemingway and a number of other writers. She could spot the talent and was able to help them move forward. So again, listening, observing, working with her lessons from the past and helping others to move forward. Norman Rockwell, Chris Rock, Bob Marley, Rosa Parks, James Joyce, Rosa Parks in terms of changing history, right? Guerin, Ronald Reagan, a number of people. So this week in history, we've got a number of things going on. The National Baseball League was started with 8 teams in 1876. Then in 1900, there were 6 different cities. that agreed to form the American League. And in 1921, air mail service opened between New York and San Francisco. On February 3rd, in 1962, President Kennedy banned all trade with Cuba. So that was the beginning of the sanctions there. On February 4th, in 1909, California law segregated Caucasian and Japanese school children. I wasn't aware of that, so I thought I would put that in. There was segregation, obviously, still going on in much of the country, but this was different in California. In 1974, newspaper heiress Patty Hearst was kidnapped. In 1922, February 5th, Reader's Digest was first published. In 1933, Adolf Hitler's Third Reich begins press censorship. And I thought, given the what's going on with banning books all across the country, I thought that was an appropriate reminder in terms of what's gone on in the past, right? So here we are with the Gate 13. What have we learned from the past with regard to the banning of books and other kinds of censorship? In 1936, Hitler also opened the Fourth Winter Olympics, happened to be on the same day, February 6th. And in 1818, the first successful U.S. educational magazine, Academician, began publication in New York City. In 1964, the Beatles are greeted by 25,000 fans upon their arrival in the United States at JFK Airport. So this week, things might occur to you from the past. It might be a good week for listening. It might be a good week for pulling up things from the past. This is actually the gate that has people create catalogs and history, history books, history catalogs, whatever, that are for families or towns, or these are the historians, right? The people with the Gate 13. These are the historians in our families, in our cultures, in our cities and states. These are the people who keep track of what happened. And then they happen to be good listeners too. So they are wonderful museum curators and people who might be really that historian buff that just can't stop talking sometimes about what's going on. But anyway, you might have a feeling that you'll want to all of a sudden go through the pictures that you haven't gone through in a long time. You might have the feeling that you want to make sure that the family knows where everything is in case if you're deciding to move or something like that, or some other things are changing. It's a good time to ask your parents or grandparents where things are and how things are kept and where the stories are, right? So if any of that occurs this week, don't be surprised. It's in the energy and it'll be with us all week, well, at least through the 7th. And I will see you on the 8th. Take care. Have a great week. Bye.